So welcome back after our adjournment. The next item on our agenda is our deliberations report. So handing over to Stephanie to present.
So this report presents the analysis of the submissions received on the Wairarapa Class 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy and is seeking agreement from the working group today to recommend a final policy for adoption by the Wairarapa District Councils. So as part of the consultation, community feedback was sought on three key proposals. The first was to amend the venue relocation policy so that no existing venues would be able to relocate in Masterton, and the existing venues in Carterton and South Wairarapa would be unable to relocate to a highly deprived area if they were outside of a main counting. The second proposal was an amendment that would mean no new standalone TAB venues are able to assist. And the third was an amendment to clarify Wairarapa has a sinking lid approach to electronic gaming machines rather than a capped approach, which is the current wording of the policy. So overall, the majority of submitters supported the proposed changes to the policy, and where they did not, those reasons for that are outlined within the report for your consideration. Given the majority of submitters did support the proposed policy, staff consider it appropriate for the working group to recommend that council adopt the proposed policy without further amendment. Subject to your endorsement today, the next step would recommendation would be presented to the council meetings in May for consideration. Happy to take any questions.
Councillors, questions? Stephanie?
Questions or statements?
We'll go to ask, cover off any questions that anyone has first, and then we can.
Just a quick question. Firstly, due to the nature of the feedback that we've had, you're suggesting no need for further amendment, but would it be appropriate or is it relatively easy to amend if it is the decision of this table, the policy around permanent relocation to perhaps allow what we've heard from submitters this morning around temporary relocation?
Yeah, I would say it's completely open to the working group discussion around the feedback that they've received, and definitely encourage the working group to take on board the views of the community.
Any other questions? Open up for comments, discussion, deliberations. Go, Craig, you're busting.
No, it was just a pertinent point that Melissa brought up, is that we heard through all the deliberations some concern around the relocation, especially temporary relocation. And I think it was quite a valid point that if your building has to get earthquake strengthened, that moving forward, and again a time frame suggested. I think that's quite a valid point to bring up and amongst all of this here.
One of the questions that our council raised about this clause was the parameters as well about where that relocation could take place, wasn't it? We were seeking with where, if you're going to relocate, within what sort of boundaries were you allowed to relocate to? Or was it within towns? Was it within streets? Was it, if you have to move out of Marston, do you move to Featherston? Was there consideration around that?
So what sort of time limit would you be looking at? Would they, is this just an indefinite time limit? It could go on forever.
It can't be indefinite.
It can't be indefinite.
It seems like that would be the case.
No, you can't do it.
Speed in which things happen.
There would need to be extenuating circumstances, but I guess that would go through to the reg building and regs team. Like if there was a fire or a flood, and if they needed to do repairs, I think it is sort of justified for a temporary relocation, and one would presume that they would have an indication of that time frame.
Yeah, would go
to be back into the building.
Yeah, but new builds, you do improvements, you relocating to a different area. You kind of got an indication of how long it's going to be, right? And so 6 months feels about right to me. 6 months with the option to renew for another 6 months.
That's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
Because it also means it gives them impetus to actually get on and do it instead of thinking, well, it's almost indefinite. I can shift over here and play the game a bit here.
And provided I don't do the work,
Yeah.
nobody's telling me that I've got to move back to my own building. I'm still here
Yeah.
temporarily. And I'm sure in most circumstances that wouldn't be the case, but unfortunately, and
You've got to play the lowest.
you do have to plan for those who do
Yeah.
play the game.
Trust House, great operator,
Mm.
but the next guy next door might not be quite as vulnerable.
Don't think a timeline of 6 months would be realistic in any circumstances for proposing to have a building rebuilt.
I was just saying an indication, right?
But
So with a rollover period for.
if you had a fire, for example, and you need to move out, and you've got to go through the processes of having plans drawn up, going through the council consenting processes, before you'd even start, you could be looking at 12 months. So to be realistic, you'd have to say 12 months to 18 months to start with, just for the processes that you have to go through.
Do you look at say 12 months, but then after that it becomes a 6-monthly review? You just to provide that impetus to actually get on and do.
I think that's more realistic.
To work towards.
Yeah.
So I guess a question, and I'm pleased you came in there, Steve, because I was going to ask with your experience and what you thought would be realistic. What would the recommendation on wording be from staff from back from a building and reg viewpoint? Yeah, or a time frame. I mean, I guess because we're looking at a temporary relocation, and it could be the building needs earthquake strengthening, could be one. It could be, oh my God, we've got a flood, and as John Prendergast pointed out, it could take 3 months for the building to dry out, but it could be a fire. It's kind of like the options for temporary relocation are justifiable, but what could the parameters be around?
So I think if I can just jump in, I think the clause that they would be looking to amend was that clause 6.1 of the policy, which reads, council will not grant consent for a class 4 venue to re-establish at a new site in Marsden District under any circumstances. And the suggestion was to add in permanent there. So whether it would be council will not grant consent for a class 4 venue to permanently re-establish at a new site in Marsden District under any circumstances. Would that cover it without getting specific?
Then you need a sub-clause under that.
Yeah, so
define.
So the Trust House have suggested an amendment, a wording amendment to read class 4 gambling venues cannot permanently relocate in Masterton under any circumstances. Council will consider on a case-by-case basis a request by an existing venue operator to temporarily relocate machines from an existing venue. So that uses both permanent and indicates temporary. I guess the only thing that I then ask is there a need for us to strengthen that again by putting in some sort of time frame, or does the fact that council are considering this on a case-by-case basis, is there enough there to say, well, actually, on the basis that there was a fire, you've got 12 months, or on the basis you had a flood, you've got 12 weeks.
Yeah, but if it's not written down, then it's open to interpretation.
It is.
Yeah, and so
I would be more comfortable with adding to that some sort of time frame. I think the sort of basis that is there is good, but I think it could just be strengthened with an indication of time
So
frame.
I guess looking to our two councillors from Masterton, because this was the clause that around your council table that was flagged, and the policy, which is why we've come back and the policy was re-amended. Because our decision today then goes to each of our councils to then be adopted. I guess we don't want to get to another situation where we unanimously make a recommendation and then one of the councils go, no, we're not adopting it. We would need to go back again. So I think sort of, I guess, hearing from you guys from Masterton first would be really helpful. And then we can also from Carterton and South Wairarapa. So Tim.
I see John's point, but at the same time, that very incident taking place would, to me, be a good opportunity to refer for reduced numbers because of something that's happened. Like I voted to reduce the numbers, and I feel like it's hard to speak for when Melissa shares that and then John raises that point. It seems quite valid to me, but it's got to be for extreme circumstances as to why they'd be in and out. And I'm thinking of things like a flood or a fire, not thinking earthquake strengthening, because that will take forever and they'll just end up in a venue permanently. So I would be thinking quite specifically around really short-term things where a business could be in and out quite quickly. That's the way I'd read it.
So you're open to some form of amendment?
But only for something like a fire or a flood.
Yep.
No, I'm not earthquake strengthening to me. Would have to be something that no one expected.
Moving to new premises.
Yeah, to temporarily be in a new premises.
So extenuating circumstances.
But you're moving out of lower socioeconomic environment, right? Low decile area to a higher decile area because those guys have got more money to spend. You know, gambling doesn't actually choose who, where the addiction goes, right? You say no.
Yeah, well,
that's just like we're going to.
To me, low and high in a place like Marston doesn't matter because you can get from a low to a high area by riding a bike for 3 minutes. It's not like me going from Kilburnie to Johnsonville or from Johnsonville to Porirua East or something like that. It's just so accessible.
I think what we're actually talking about isn't moving it into those areas. It's actually more the because there is a clause in the policy that they cannot move to the low socioeconomic areas. It's more around the case that an existing venue, if for any reason that it needs to temporarily relocate for circumstances outside of their control.
Firstly, I guess I would ask Tim, you've said you could be understanding of flood or fire, but not earthquake strengthening. I just wonder if we had a time frame built into the clause that actually gave direction that action had to happen, what benefit there would be to not allowing the increased safety of a building if an establishment is moving out with the express intention because they have to of moving back to that building.
Well, I don't understand your point.
Well, you've said you'd be okay with fire and flood, but not earthquake strengthening. And yet if they are bound by a time frame, surely it's better to have people in a safe building than an unsafe building. I'm not sure I understand your point.
My point would be I'd do a maximum time frame and say 3 months. That's what I would do. Despite what you said, Steve, because I could just see it going on and on forever in regards to a venue would almost become a permanent venue.
But if a building was destroyed by fire, 3 months is just, I mean, you can't even get a building cleared out in that period of time. Yeah. So that would be.
You have to have a consent just to remove the demolished materials.
Yeah. Craig and Tim, when this policy came to your council for endorsement to go to consultation, what was the vote split when this was voted? Was
5-4.
5-4, so it was close.
I don't. 5-4.
I can't remember.
Yes, I know. It was 5-4 because one person I thought.
I can't remember. I don't know.
It's difficult not to include earthquake in there because you, as Melissa's pointed out, you do want people to upgrade their buildings so that they're safer for people. And even the time involved in that, and I know it's gone on and on and on. You need to earthquake prone buildings have to be included in that if we're going to allow for fire and flooding or.
In that case, I don't support it. I won't support it.
Is that because you want to see a reduction in?
Yeah, I want to see a reduction.
That's your prime motivation.
Do we not achieve that with the sinking bid policy?
This is a further chance to do it. So if that happens, then I'm comfortable for that.
Sorry, if what happens?
Yeah, so if it's just by pure bad luck that a building's damaged and the numbers are reduced because of that, then I would not support a means in which the numbers are retained. And in the case of an earthquake strengthened building, that those numbers will be retained almost indefinitely from what I see happening in our towns. So no, I won't support it. I would stick to it would just be no.
Okay. One of the things I found interesting was the stats that we've seen on online gambling. That's kind of
with no controls.
Quite frightening, no controls. And I'm opposed to gambling, right? So I'm not as a supporter of the industry at all. Like, maybe something's better than nothing, than seeing the social harm that could come in our communities from everybody moving to, online gambling as a result of there being nowhere to go. Because also there's a social aspect to this activity as well, rather than just, you meet up with your mates, destructive as it may be. I'm not going to qualify on that social aspect of it at all, but, maybe we're better like just to recognise the beast that is there and have some controls around it rather than just eliminate it and push it into the back rooms or the bedrooms of,
And online
the
gambling
houses.
doesn't bring any money back into our communities and
No,
either,
that's what
does it?
Tane love about the TAB, right? Let's get it online.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, I would support an alteration and have some timeframes around it. I think that's a very realistic way of doing it.
I mean, I'm certainly not in favour of permanent movement, but I think the acknowledgement that I guess life happens to business and unforeseen circumstances do happen. I would be comfortable with an amendment in that direction, but I think it definitely has to have a time frame, a realistic time frame around it that allows both for the work to be done, but not for dilly-dallying and kind of playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other addition to that is the financial stability of your business rests on the success of your gaming machines, then probably have a bigger problem with your business there. Not having the gaming machines there. So explain to that for how long you don't have them for. Can you survive without them? Yes or no?
Steve?
I'm open to having a timeline put on it.
Would we be within that camp?
Yeah, that's it. I support that time frame. Definitely the temporary relocation only under those specific situations that were discussed via flood, acts of God, I guess, or earthquake strengthening.
Can I ask you that question about that clarification that we were seeking around the relocation parameters? Can you?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, when the policy was in front of South Wairarapa District Council, there was some concern around the relocation being just Masterton, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So there were some voices in regards to strengthening that across the district. So similar to, to the split vote, there's definitely, there was some discussion around whether or not that needed to be strengthened as well to include the full district.
Thank you.
Okay.
But for me, it's also part of the wider picture. I struggle with all three councils having different rules. Okay, and I'm looking, let's look further down the track here. So I think it would be good for us to all have the same rules.
So I don't struggle with that. I see us, Marston, is quite different to Carterton and South Wairarapa, especially East Masterton. That's my perspective.
But there are no gaming machines or outlets in East Masterton.
No, but my point, which I shared with Martin before, is East Masterton and West Masterton are 2 minutes away from each other in a car.
I think the thing, and I absolutely hear your point and I respect it. And I think we all collectively agree that we don't want to be in a position where harm from gambling or gambling opportunities grow. But I think we've got to be careful that we're not trying to construct the policy in a way that kind of achieves our own goal. And it feels to me like discussing the fact that if venues close because they have a fire and that leads to the ultimate goal of less, kind of feels like we are driving the policy in a way to reach it, our own objectives, and that doesn't feel like the point of policy. Policy should be neutral, but provide framework for the things that it supports rather than driving its own agenda. That kind of feels like.
Thank you for that. I was about to say that we need to remember that we are not bringing our personal ideas and beliefs, and we need to be thinking about the big picture. And we've already got the sinking lid policy. There's always two sides to a coin, and we are looking at, we've already reduced the number of gaming machines in the rohi, the entire rohi of Wairarapa, significantly since 2015. So that the policy is already working in that regard. I think having heard and read submissions around the fact that the online gaming is increasing, I personally know of some people who have got themselves in a lot of strife through online, but wouldn't go to a pub or a gaming outlet venue. And that's not part of our parameter in what we are discussing today. We are looking at a policy which we are reviewing. It's not a brand new policy. So we are reviewing a policy that has worked very, very well to this point. We are, to me, tightening the nuts a little bit, but without attempting to control specifically. We need to have a sort of a little bit of a sort of a broader thinking of, what is a policy? What is a policy attempting to achieve, as opposed to being completely, this is what we want you to do. And I think we need to be very mindful of that when we make our recommendations. Anyone else?
I'm yeah, I'm good.
Sorry. Where to from here?
Yeah,
In terms of amending, do we look to amend the wording of that particular clause?
Tim's not.
Well, if the majority of the group wants that, then that's what will happen.
Sorry?
If the majority of this group wants that, then that's what will happen.
Yeah, but we also need to be confident that as elected members representing our three councils, that and it's like any committee, when a decision is made, that we all need to own that decision. So when we take it to our respective councils, that as the representatives of this group sitting around our council table, when this goes up to council for endorsing and adopting, that we need to own the decision that is made today and not get to our council meetings and then go, actually, I didn't really approve of it, so I'm going to vote against it. Like we've got to be quite solid around this, because otherwise it's going to come back again and the staff are already under the pump. That's what I would really like to make sure that we are all on the same page with today.
Is it possible to ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, given that some of the other amendments were around the inability to move to lower socioeconomic areas, etc., an amendment of this particular clause allowing potentially temporary movement would still be protected by the inability for venues to move into those areas, wouldn't it? So you'd still be keeping the temporary venue within its sort of current confines, or that? Sure.
It would depend how you amend the clause, because at the moment, as clause 6.1 is written, is that no, must and specific, no venue relocations are permitted. So examples around the deprivation are currently only applying to South Wairarapa and Carterton, because Masterton is currently in the draft policy as it's written and saying that there would be none. That you could amend the policy if that's where the group wanted to go, to make those provisions match for a temporary relocation if that was the agreement of the working group.
So would it be good, we've got 3 recommendations in front of us. And I'm just thinking so the recommendations that we have in front of us that it is recommended that the Wairarapa Policy Working Group 1 notes that the Wairarapa Policy Working Group have been provided with the full set of submissions as part of the hearings report, and 2, considers the community feedback received and advice from staff. I'd like to move those 2 recommendations initially. Thank you, Craig, for seconding that. Is everyone in favour of that? Then the 3rd recommendation is recommending the Wairarapa District Council adopt the proposed Wairarapa Class 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy as per attachment 1. What I'm hearing from our deliberations is that we would like to make an amendment to clause 6, which is the venue relocation. That's correct. And at the moment, we've got a couple of discussions going. So 6.3 is specific to Carterton and South Wairarapa. And I'm just going to read.
We've got 1A, which
and 1A is specific to Masterton. Is this working group, first of all, looking at including no new sites in South Wairarapa and Carterton as well? Or are we happy to leave 6.3 for Carterton South Wairarapa as is? So I just want to clarify that as first. It's on page 135.
Yeah.
Or 134, 135, Steve.
Well, for me personally, if we could all agree to change and have a Wairarapa wide, that just includes the temporary movement into an area, obviously, that's suitable for the reasons of if there's a something happens to the building. I'm happy to not allow in Carterton to move to a new area unless that occurs. So the building fire, I'm happy to change that, but we need Masterton to be willing to come to the party of just having that one reasoning behind it. I'm not sure how South Wairarapa feels about it.
Similar in the kind of the feedback that we got when this draft policy came to our council, was that there were a fair proportion of people who sort of probably leaned closer to a Masterton position than what was outlined for the Southway and this. I'm just conscious that going to the inability to establish a new venue across the whole district is not what we consulted on. And I just wonder where that leads us in terms of consultation. I mean, obviously, the majority of people supported the policy as it is, which is quite restrictive, but that's an extra step again that we've not consultated in this area. I'm like you, I personally feel comfortable with it, but I am conscious that we've not consulted on it.
I was thinking that too. Have we any feedback from staff around that?
No, I think I would say that that's correct. While there was an option for Carterton and South Wairarapa submitters to indicate if they would prefer a more restrictive approach, it wasn't outlined as the council's preferred position. There were around, I think, 31% that supported that more restrictive, whereas 52% supported what was proposed. And it's hard to say as if if the whole district had decided to go out with that more strict relocation policy, if you may have got more submitted, or may have heard from people
Particularly the businesses that would be
affected in South Wairarapa and Carterton. It's difficult to say.
Yeah, and I'd support that and say it's also a change of service level,
Yeah.
and that would concern me without consultation.
Yeah. So we'll leave 6.3 as it stands. Is everybody comfortable with that around the table, which is the top of page 135? Okay, so then that takes us back to 6.1. Around council will not grant consent for Class 4 venues to re-establish at a new site in Marston under any circumstances. So this is the one that, following the consultation and submissions that we received, we are considering a word change. Again, I'm sorry, I keep looking to staff because well, go.
I just, while I would support a change, does the same not apply? Okay, that it has not been consulted on?
I think there were a couple of recommendations around the inclusion of the word permanent and a time frame. I think the inclusion of the word permanent isn't a significant change because the policy implied. Steph, I don't know what your
No, I would say that you are entitled to take into account submitted feedback. I think Marston did signal that they were looking for that more prohibitive option.
70% of submitters went.
A lot of submitters did support that as well. So I think it's for the group to take into consideration as part of deliberations.
Yeah, 70% of submitters said.
And it has been raised as part of the hearings, as opposed to an earlier point, which was around a stronger stance from all of the district that hasn't necessarily been presented today by any of our submitters. So I think as well, this is part of the deliberations, as this is a point that has come up today for your consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
tricky one because I can see the, acts of God take place, but ultimately this is a Marsden specific clause. And ultimately, I guess the two members at this table need to feel confident one way or the other what your council will respond to. I'm much like yourself, Robin. I don't want to be in a position where this committee makes a change or supports a clause that isn't then supported at your council table.
And I feel that was part of our initial conversations when we were talking about the new policy, and we talked about hazards and what could happen to buildings, and that's why we came up with what we did. And we were all surprised. Well, I know Garden was surprised. At
there were members of Masters surprised as well.
Change in that regard.
That's exactly right, and that was discussed at quite some length at our previous meeting of this group. Yeah.
Well, it's really impossible to know, isn't it?
It's impossible to know.
I don't know how that room will vote.
So you would support some change or no change?
No change.
Because I would support change. No.
It's like swords at dawn.
I think when you've taken into consideration the time and effort that our people have actually submitted and prepared to come in online and speak about this and how it would impact them. I mean, you can take some of what they've said, if I can put it impolitely, with a grain of salt. But about relocating under special circumstances, the way that they raised that, and just about all of them have raised the same thing. I think that speaks volumes about how they feel about the ability to relocate under special circumstances. And they did say under special circumstances. So I think, me, I would, if I lived in Marsden or I was representing Marsden, I'd be taking that into consideration.
But
What sort of time frame would you be thinking, Steve? Could it be 5 years, 10 years?
No, nowhere near that long. Just when you think about consenting, something happens, just the time it takes to go through that initial consenting process and even engaging an architect. I mean, you guys know the time involved in engaging an architect to come up with concepts, then whether the building owner might have 2 or 3 he's got to come decide upon, then they go back to the architect and they draw up the final plans. That could easily be 6 months. Even just finding an architect that can do the work to start with could be 3 months to 4 months. So you'd really have to allow to me personally, 18 months to 2 years for a new build depending on the venue, obviously. So two years, I think. But if you said 12 months, if you have 12 months with a 6 month clause,
if they can prove that they're being held up because of something outside of their control.
whether you'd want to put a cap on that, I don't know. I guess it'd be up to the group who are reviewing it.
I guess bearing in mind that complete rebuild is worst case scenario. A fire, for instance, or potentially even earthquake strengthening may well be completed much quicker.
Yeah.
But I guess we're looking at that time frame for worst case scenario.
So if I can make a suggestion, and I guess really I'm looking to you, Tim, first, because listening to your comments and how strongly you feel about this. If clause 6.1 read, council will not grant consent for class 4 venue permanently re-establish at a new site in Masterton district under any circumstances. Could we then add, take out so the permanent re-establish, so that would actually to be permanently re-establish. Then could we add another clause under extraordinary circumstances?
Acts of God.
Yeah, natural disaster, fire, flood, whatever. And again, I'm looking to staff for the correct wording to fit in with regs. Temporary relocation will be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Temporary relocation due to act of God or?
Yeah, or whatever. So yeah, looking.
There's already extraordinary circumstances defined in 6.2, which includes expiration of lease, which is some of the circumstances which I don't think this group is considering. So I would support a wording that is different from extraordinary circumstances. So there's not.
Okay.
Council will consider on a case-by-case basis a request by an existing venue operator to temporarily relocate machines from an existing venue. But then
I mean, I don't know whether I understand where you're coming from. And I don't know whether you'd want to agree to include because of the expiration of a lease or blah, blah, blah. To me, that's not what we're talking about.
No.
I don't know whether you'd be including all 6.2.
No.
So I think 6.2 needs to stay separately because that's, so what I was proposing is 6.1 has a
or a B or
has a or maybe so it's permanently, so if the word is inserted before to permanently goes in before re-establish is 6.1, and then it could be temporary. And again, we need to state that it is in Masterton district. Temporary relocation in the Masterton district may be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Or extenuating.
For extenuating circumstances, e.g. Yeah. Would that
No, perhaps more than anyone in this group, I don't know all your backgrounds, but I'm aware of the impact of gambling that it has on the community and having individuals in the community more than anyone. And I see the whole online thing just put out there as a I don't know the right phrase, just as a distraction to what does happen in our own communities with the venues where people are putting a lot of money in to those machines. Sure, we get stuff back, even at schools like Lakeview School, we get supported by Trust House and organisations like that as a school, but the impact it has on some of the families in that community as individual families, I think are incredibly, they're awful. And that's my point. That's where I come from. And I know you shouldn't just represent one part of your community, but it's one that I'm so involved and invested in. So that's my point. And I do see the online thing as a distraction. I also think a lot of people who do online gambling are quite different to some of the people who are using venue gambling. That would be my perspective as well. That would be my view. So it's I feel like I know what you want me to do, but
Would it temporarily be probably doing certainly to re-establish temporarily? It doesn't say it doesn't qualify now. It says to re-establish. Right, and play around with any circumstances, so it's temporarily re-established.
the only thing I'd consider is a really short temporary. Like really short.
I think
I know
you're
you're-
setting something which is
Yeah.
impossible to achieve. So you might as well not have it in there at all.
Yeah. What's impossible? A year?
I would take 12 months with the possibility for extension, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. You've got more experience in this area than I do. But you're not going to get 2 years right now.
No, I agree with what Craig's mentioned with 12 months and then an additional 6 months. Well, an extra 6 months if you. But
Come up with a plan, yeah.
you're just not going to achieve something in 3 months, 6. I mean, look at how long it takes to build a house now. You're looking at 12 months really to build a
I
house.
see some citizens of Greytown on the weekend. Scaffolding's just gone up around their house from a fire they had at their place in their roof August of last year. They've been living in the garage since then. So long it's taken, and that's just for the roof of their house.
So
I'm kind of conscious that we're just
Yeah.
going round and round and
We want the same thing.
regurgitating.
We was
So
thinking, like,
it's-
we're trying to comfort zone for Tim to be in though, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what does that look like? So basically we have two options here. I see. We adopt it as is without any amendments. I would like to see the word permanently re-establish. Just again, so that clarifies a little bit more under the policy, but not wedded to it at all. The crux is, do we as a working group want to recommend any wording to allow a temporary relocation under extenuating circumstances? I guess is.
Sorry, Robin, would I be right in thinking that worst case scenario, this committee recommends a amendment to 6.1, which softens slightly to allow temporary relocation. Worst case scenario, if Masterton does not accept that, we simply revert back to 6.1 as it stands, which is allows under no circumstance relocation, and we then accept the policy as it's written.
We able to do that?
I think you could make a recommendation that if that Marsden District Council is able to approve the venue relocation policy for the district without referral back to the Wairarapa policy
Yeah,
working group, if that's
I think so.
something the group
Is everyone
would
comfortable?
be comfortable with as a whole.
It's been good to have a little bit of background as to why Marsden District Council chose to go against the recommendation of this committee with our proposal to start with. It would have been good to have to be able to read some background to it, because it's difficult to sit around the table and tell you guys what you should be doing. But that's what we have to do with taking into consideration what our submitters have said, which is the whole point of what we're doing today. So it's really difficult to not.
It is difficult, undeniably so.
And Tim, I don't discount what you're saying about the harm that gambling causes at all, right? We can all see it. So I don't have a foot in the camp here of like promoting this in the slightest. But I think equally we kind of need to show that we're listening to what our submitters have said, who are the operators who are returning some money back to our communities. There is harm minimisation programs in place, which appear to be relatively successful. I'm just trying to find a comfortable spot where you can sit, right, where
I wasn't completely convinced by John's description of what happens in a gambling facility when
no, I wasn't convinced by that.
for 3 hours they get talked to once.
But that's what happens at Sky City as well. I think it's like that's what the industry recommends.
Yeah.
Sorry, that wasn't true.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm sliding into gambling advocate, which is not where I want to sit, but we're not actually being asked to consider the merits of harm minimisation efforts with this paper. We're being asked to consider some specific points on the policy.
Yes, I agree.
So just a question. If we change the one word, okay, one word, will it then come back to our specific council, Marsden, if there is a request to move temporarily?
Yes. Well,
So it will then still be
it
up.
would enable applications.
It would enable applications, and then it would then be up to our council and our individual council to make the decision, yes or no.
Yes. To grant that consent.
Yeah.
Therein lies maybe the answer.
Can you explain that again?
Yeah. Okay. So you put in there, council will not grant consent to permanently re-establish. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can't go just across the street. However, if so that's the
6.1.A.
And
so no, I wouldn't even put it. I wouldn't even put in an A. I wouldn't even put an A.
would permanently go.
It would be
So
be because this is specific to Marsden. We would be then saying, say Trust House came to us and said, hey, look, the frickin' building's burnt down, guys. We would like to go take them down the street to where there's already a site, put them in there until we can come back here, and then we can then decide the time frame and whether or not it happens.
And whether the circumstances extenuating.
Enough.
and then it comes back. That will then come back to your specific council.
Yep. Come back to our specific council.
You know what I'm like, Craig?
I know it.
And I don't like gambling. and I see the impact on the community. I understand your point as well, Melissa, as well. That this here, this is what we voted for as a council. So it's more likely from our council, based on history, that it's going to go through exactly like this than with any amendment made to it.
So would the word, I guess, I'm asking, would you be happy to accept an amendment to insert the word permanently in front of re-establish for the sake of this? Because we can sit here and go round and round and round the table and say the same things using different words all day. But I think what we need to sort of just, if we put that word in permanently, would you be comfortable to support that from this working group today?
From the working group, okay, but I'm not saying I'll support it.
Yeah, I put it.
That's right. So what I'm just saying, so if we actually put in the word permanently re-establish at 6.1, are you comfortable as and then we adopt the rest of the policy as it stands? Are you?
For the purpose of this working group, because I know everyone's not going to agree with my other perspective, so put it in there, it's fine. But when it comes to council, it will be quite different from my perspective.
I feel particularly uncomfortable with that from probably 3 perspectives. The first being voting one way at this working group and a separate way at council doesn't sit well with me. Saying that that you have such set values on gambling is commendable and I understand it, but it feels as though perhaps the genuine nature of consultation is not quite there because your value is so so strongly held. And whilst Masterton made a vote to consult on a particular policy, that policy was still open to consultation. That the whole point of the consultation is to speak to the community and gather their views. And what we're being asked to do today is to consider those views and the presenters we've seen. So making a decision based on what your council voted on several months ago doesn't sit right either, because actually the decision-making process should be based on the consultation.
The submissions and
and the submission
consultation.
that we've received.
We've been told time and time again at our council that consultation isn't everything, especially when there's only 23 people who make a submission. So I don't support that. Yeah.
I think we need to also remember that the whole of the Wairarapa is suffering from consultation fatigue at the moment. I actually thought getting 23 submissions was quite good, and it often shows that when you don't have as many submissions, and bearing in mind this is only a review of what was already in place and has already previously been consulted on, that normally people don't make submissions on something that they're happy and comfortable with, as the general rule of thumb, from what I've learnt in my time sitting on council and listening to consultation. But I think I agree, Melissa. I think thank you so much. You put that really, really well. I think we do need to be very conscious. I have views on gambling, and it's not something I imbibe in or get my head around. But I am here to look at a policy and to chair a working group that are here to look at a policy that has been consulted on, whether we receive 23 submissions or whether we receive 2,300. We have read the submissions. We have heard from people who have given up their time to submit, and we do need to be making a decision today to recommend up to our councils on this policy and on what we have heard today. And I'm actually going to move this towards a vote, and it's down to each of the members to vote how they choose to see fit for the recommendation that I will put. Steve.
Thanks, Robin. If you read that 6.1, you're allowing whoever is using that existing place to re-establish anyway, aren't you?
Council will not grant consent for a Class 4 venue to re-establish at a new site of Masterton District.
So they'll re-establish at the same, let's say they have a fire, they'll put their gambling machines into storage or whatever, and they'll bring them back out. So you're not going to have any less than what you had originally, are you?
For a period of time, you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you might, those people that you're talking about that used to go to that facility gambling, they'll just go down the road, like that 2 kilometres that you just said, or hop in their car or whatever and go somewhere else. And then as soon as this is re-established, they'll go back to their old place that they used to go. But it'll be nice and new and will probably attract more people to go.
Who knows, Steve?
But
Who knows?
you're still going to have the same venue going back there again at a certain point, whether it's 12 months or 18 months or 2 years. So all we're talking about is giving them ability to just temporarily re-establish themselves.
So what if the venue didn't reopen?
Well, I guess you.
So I was thinking, let that.
Yeah.
So I think we are crystal ball gazing,
Yeah.
shifts, whatever. We're getting outside our scope of what this group is about. Our group is to make a recommendation to our councils on a policy.
So with this recommendation, you can ask me to support this recommendation here, and I will, but I'm not going to go back to council and vote for it. Do you
So
understand?
then, so if that's how strongly you feel, then
Yeah, yep.
I would
Yeah.
respectfully ask you don't support it at this working group.
Yep.
Because if you support it at this working group
Yep.
and it's a unanimous decision, and then you go to your council.
Yep.
To me, that's
Thank you, Robin.
it's-
That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
so to me that would not be ethical at all in any way, shape, or form.
That's what I feel like I was being asked to do before. Support it here and then support it at our council. To me, that's unethical.
Yeah, cool. Right. Have we discussed this enough? Do we think?
Yep.
I think so.
I could keep going.
I'll tell you.
Got no plans for the afternoon.
So, moving on to our third recommendation. And the recommendation will be recommends the Wairarapa District Councils adopt the proposed Wairarapa Class 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy attachment 1 with the amendment to clause 6.1, the word permanently to be inserted in front of re-establish. So the clause 6.1 will receive, council will not grant consent for a class 4 venue to permanently re-establish at a new site in Masterton district under any circumstances. Would anyone like to move that?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Martin. A seconder. Thank you, Craig. All those in favours by show of hands? Thank you. Against? Tim's against. Would you like that recorded, Tim?
Yep.
Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. And thank you all so much for all the discussions. And it is very emotive. It really is an emotive topic. So I just thank everyone for their time today. And as the meeting has concluded, I will close with a karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou hariki, a ihu kara iti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi nā tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, aki, 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 and any. Declare the meeting closed at 12:02. Thank you, everybody. Great mahi today. Thank you for all your work too.